What we're going to be talking about now, well, I'm going to be just quite frank before we even get started, ticks me off. Personally and definitely professionally. We have joining us now the president of Emmerich Newspapers, Wyatt Emmerich, joining us live on the air. How you doing this morning, Wyatt? Good to see you. Good to talk to you.
Doing fine.
Glad to hear it. Now, walk us through the story of what's going on in Clarksdale with the editorial that was run and what has happened since then out of that editorial.
The city council and the mayor wanted to raise taxes, I think 2% to fund the police. And there were several meetings about this. And then they had a special meeting where they broadened the use of the money. It could be for economic development purpose. They just made it basically they could use the money for whatever they wanted to. But we weren't notified of this meeting as we typically are and as is required by law. And so the publisher there wrote a critical editorial saying that you're doing this in secrecy. This is a big change to what the tax was supposed to do, and this is not transparent. And the mayor and the commissioners did not like the editorial, and they went to a judge in Jackson, Judge Crystal Wise Martin, and without us even getting a chance to argue or be at the hearing, and the judge ordered us to to not publish the editorial.
So this was an ex parte ruling. Basically, you weren't invited to come in and argue your side of the case. She just granted this ruling. But let's go back to a second. This was the meeting in question wasn't one of the regularly scheduled meetings. This was a special called meeting, and I believe the law states that the media and the public have to be notified. Is it at least an hour before the meeting?
I think so. I don't know the exact time period, but they admitted that they made a mistake. The clerk said she got busy and forgot to send out the notifications. What's unusual about this is, first of all, this was an editorial. It was clearly marked as opinion. Second of all, it was factually accurate, and it certainly was involved with a important public policy issue. I mean, taxes. And then finally, a government entity is not allowed to sue for libel. The Supreme Court has made that clear. And then fourthly, we weren't even invited to the hearing. And fifthly, what the heck were they doing in Jackson? They're supposed to do this in Clarksdale, so the whole thing was just remarkably bizarre.
Well, it is. And, I go back to something that I tell people all the time because I've dealt with politics for the last 10 years on the air. And when people say, boy, you're going to get in trouble, I'm like, what you don't realize is that is the literal job description of the press, is to fight City Hall when they need to be fought. You've always heard the expression, you can't fight City Hall. Well, that's kind of what you do in journalism. You hold them accountable when you see things going the wrong way. And to think that we have wound up in a position where a judge has issued a ruling saying, oh, no, you can fight City Hall, but not right now, is just almost unreal to me. Wyatt?
Well, this has created a national backlash. I've been interviewed by the Washington Post, New York Times, Daily Beast. There are dozens of articles in major national publications. So this really hit a nerve. And remember that the First Amendment is not just for the press. The First Amendment is for your speech, your individual speech. And this is an extremely dangerous precedent that we intend to fight and to make sure that this law does not stand, and that we get good case law on the books to make it clear that you can't do this. So, we're going to pursue it and take it to its legal conclusion and rectify this.
Well, and I think you have to, and you've got about 5 different legal standings you can challenge it on. It seems like it's going to be a slam dunk, but the fact remains you shouldn't have to fight this fight to begin with, because this is already pretty well established, at least so we thought. But as it turns out, sometimes a judge can just do whatever they want to do. That's what it feels like, isn't it?
My company publishes little weeklies and websites all over the state. And, most mayors and council members and police, they're cooperative. They understand the role of the media and the press. So, this is just, an unusual event. This particular mayor really feels like, and I think he believes this, that the paper is there to do what the mayor tells them to. That as mayor of the town, the paper's supposed to work for him and basically be a propaganda organ for the mayor and the city council. He just has a different interpretation of the role of a newspaper in a small town. We feel like the newspaper should promote the community, but there's also a role to make sure people are informed about what's going on, especially when there's a significant change about a tax increase. I mean, it's one thing to raise taxes to go to the police. It's another thing if you're going to use it for general purposes. That's a different deal, and the people needed to be informed of that.
Well, and when they're going to make that change in a special called meeting, that they don't announce ahead of time that they're going to be doing it to the press or to anyone else, forget the Open Meetings Act and the Sunshine Law, as it's called. That's just, I don't even know if borderline would be the correct term here, but that's misrepresentation of what you're doing with people's tax dollars. And to me is the biggest issue that's come to light here, I think.
Well, the city attorney called me and said he was going to do this, and I said, "This is going to blow up in your face. This is crazy. I've been doing this for 50 years. I understand libel, and this is not libelous." And it did blow up in their face, and it's become a national story. And but I tell you, this is in the larger picture of the decline of local journalism. We've lost 2/3 of our local journalists in this country because of big tech, and really the monopolization of digital advertising has really changed the economics of the local news business. And it's really a problem in Mississippi. I mean, we're struggling to survive. And, this is like, kicking a dog when he's down. I mean, if we're going to have to fight, the city government suing us for libel every time we criticize them, that could be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Well, and especially in this situation, because you're exactly right. The times have changed, and as a result, print journalism is struggling, and it has been for a while. That didn't just start, but it does play a vital role in, especially in communities, because that's a lot of times, many times, one of the most local sources they can get on some issues. But the thing here is, if they get their way with this ruling, and I want to get your opinion on this, it just feels to me like that is an enormous step towards basically having a state-run media like Pravda instead of a free press.
It is. But it's not going to stand, because we live in a free country and we have the First Amendment. And but you're right. I mean, we're fortunate to be living in the United States of America with the First Amendment. Other countries, that's the way it goes. I mean, there is no freedom of the press. You're just pushed around by the powers that be. I mean, in Mexico, journalists are killed by gangs if you write anything that insults the gangs. So, one country over, uh, I'd be more worried about getting shot in the head by the gangs than fighting the city councils. Oh.
Welcome back. Super Talk, Mississippi Mornings. Dave Hughes here. We have Wyatt Emmerich with us, the president of Emmerich Newspapers, and the editorial that sparked all of this. Editorials, they kind of, in a way, have different rules surrounding them as opposed to a straight, hard news story, don't they?
Yes and no. It depends on the case law. There's a Mississippi Supreme Court decision that says no. It's not completely exempt. It's sort of a gray area. I mean, First Amendment case law, like any complex federal case law, is complicated. But yes, I mean, I think opinion in is different than if you portray it as pure fact.
Definitely. The title of and this has been removed from the newspaper's website in Clarksdale, right?
Oh yes, we're following the judge's order. I have no intention of going to jail.
That's usually a good plan. Why? I like that. The title of it was Secrecy, Deception, Erode Public Trust. That seems like something people would need to know about, and it seems like, from what I know of the facts of this situation, an accurate title. And I know it wasn't just over the title, but I'm using that to illustrate the fact that this seems like we're trying to make a mountain out of a molehill just to prove a point. Is that a fair statement, you think?
Well, the publisher in Clarksdale, Floyd Ingram, he is a old school curmudgeon. I mean, he reports the news. He's great. And I mean, it's what you want in a small town weekly publisher. And he's not a sycophant. He doesn't back down. And he and the mayor butted heads. And so this has really kind of been a long simmering conflict. And in fact, the mayor, Chuck Espy, offered me $30,000 to fire Floyd. I talked about that on this show a while back. Another unusual, bizarre. Nobody's ever offered me cold hard cash to fire a publisher. But it all goes back to when the mayor and the commissioners raised their salaries to sky high levels. I think they're some of the highest paid city officials in the state. They raised their salaries, tens of thousands of dollars, like 30% or 40%, something like that. And we reported on that, and the citizens were outraged, and it's kind of been that way ever since. The mayor just doesn't like us, and so he says it was an innocent mistake that we weren't notified. Well, there've been a lot of innocent mistakes to our detriment from this mayor over the years.
Well, and the innocent mistakes always seem to miraculously happen at the same time as very pivotal things that need to be covered. It just seems like it always works out that way in my experience. I would also like to say, if I was in your position and somebody offered me $30,000 to fire an editor, I would give him a raise because he's obviously doing a really good job.
Well, I'm a lover, not a fighter, and I've tried to mediate between Floyd and the mayor over the years. And sometimes we'll write, the mayor will demand a retraction, and we'll say no. We'll write a clarification and let you get your point across. And I tried to do that this time, just to give more context to the editorial. And Floyd just said, no, I'm gonna quit if you make me do this. There's nothing wrong with that editorial, and we need to quit caving in to the mayor's silly demands. We need to fight this. And I said, okay, Floyd, I'm not going to fire you. If I hadn't fired you yet, I'm not going to fire you now. So I guess we'll fight this. You realize it's going to be you're going to have, it's going to be a hassle fighting this. And he goes, I know. I said, okay, if you're willing to do it, I'll do it. And here we are.
Well, I'm not sure we can call it a trend yet, but, we had the case last year where a sheriff's office went in and raided a local newspaper and took their computers and everything else. So I'm not sure we could call it a trend, but it's disturbing that we've had 2 cases along these lines within a 12-month period. Is there any way to get the message across that, okay, just don't do this. Don't make moves in this direction. That didn't end well for the sheriff's department. I suspect this one's not going to end well for the city officials in Clarksdale in court. Is there any way to kind of back this off a little bit?
So it used to be local news outlets were more powerful, but they've been weakened by the rise of the internet and loss of profits. You mentioned print's declining. We have more readers on our website than print. I mean, we are very techno savvy. The problem is that Google and Facebook, the big tech has monopolized digital advertising. Google was declared a monopoly this year in federal court. I'm actually, Emmerich Newspapers is a class representative in an antitrust lawsuit against Google in the same federal court up in D.C. Google has monopolized digital advertising. So even though we have a tremendous presence on the web, we're having a hard time monetizing that because it's 99 for Google and 1 for us. So that's a problem that's got to be rectified on a national scale and is being done so right now. The federal judge is looking at breaking up Google. So that's a bigger context. But the good news is the internet and quick communications has allowed this rallying cry of national people, First Amendment aficionados, who just immediately rally behind us. So locally, yes, we're weaker, but nationally we're stronger. Because we have this huge, instantaneous support group. Somebody posted on Twitter, it went viral. Next thing you know, everybody's on our side. So it's just a changing environment. But yeah, I mean, local news outlets need to regain their financial footing. And the first step is to not allow Google's monopolistic practices. Google owns every aspect of online digital advertising. People don't know this. They're a complete and total monopoly in that space. And it's not something the ordinary person sees, but it's completely crippled us financially.
And that, as you said, has kind of diluted the power, but that power still exists in some form. And in this particular case, I know you said a moment ago you're a lover, not a fighter. Even a lover occasionally has to go, okay, you've pushed me as far as you're going to push me now. It's time to push back. And I think you're kind of at that point.
Well, we had to. I mean, this is just nuts. The plaintiff on the lawsuit is the city of Clarksdale. The governmental entities can't be liable. That's just, the law doesn't work that way. And the Supreme Court has said that in New York Times versus Sullivan. They said there's no conceivable court in the land that could harbor the idea that a governmental entity could be sued, defamed or sued for libel. So it's just blatant disregard for federal law. And even though we're in Mississippi, we are part of the United States, and a local judge simply cannot ignore the fact that Mississippi is in the United States of America.
And beholden to the Constitution, among many other things. So, yeah, it's important. And I have to say, this whole story, when this first popped up, I was not shocked. I was not necessarily surprised, and this has nothing to do specifically with Clarksdale or with you. This is just kind of the way things seem to be going right now. One of these days, not going to do it on the air. Next time we talk, I could share some stories with you from personal experience that you're like, oh yeah, okay.
For sure. Anybody in the media.
It's ridiculous, and it's good to see you guys are fighting the good fight, because if we can't talk about it when elected officials don't necessarily perform up to expectations of the taxpayers, what's the point
Absolutely. I mean, we got to do our job, and you know, what I do and what my company does, we're like the nuts and bolts. We go to the city council meeting and report. We go to the board of supervisors meeting. We report when there's a crime spree. We report, homecoming queens, eagle. I mean, we're just doing debate. We're not trying to get involved in, left wing, right wing. We're just trying to do basic local news reporting. And if we go away, all you've got is innuendos and rumors posted to Facebook. Professional journalism is necessary. You don't go to the carpenter to do your brain surgery. There is training and skill involved in producing news. And Americans need to realize that they need to support true professional journalists who have gone to journalism school, taken the classes. I know there's bias, there's always, but we try to be objective. We're trained to do that. And this country needs to support professional journalism.
Wyatt Emmerich, president of Emmerich Newspapers, I am so glad you came on. Keep fighting the good fight. You're now officially my Batman, so thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.